So Donald Trump made history tonight with the earliest presidential campaign announcement in history, and also by being the first candidate to, in his campaign announcement, to complain about an FBI search warrant executed at his residence. Let's listen to that part of what he had to say tonight.
The raid of Mar-a-Lago, think of it. And I say, why didn't you raid Bush's place? Why didn't you raid Clinton? 32,000 emails. Why didn't you raid Clinton's place? Why didn't you do Obama, who took a lot of things with him?
Daniel Goldman, can Merrick Garland just sit back and watch Donald Trump accusing Barack Obama of committing federal crimes, the kind of which Donald Trump is suspected of committing?
Yeah, he has to. I mean, he's not going to charge Donald Trump for lying to the public. Otherwise, Donald Trump would have been in jail many, many times over, tens of thousands, in fact. But I think what Donald Trump is trying to line up here is obviously a criminal defense strategy. But what he's also trying to say is, I think there are two different threads of defense. One is the bad person defense, where he basically, the argument would be that he is such a bad person that he couldn't possibly have intended to commit a crime, or the pathological liar defense, which is similar, which is just to say that he is such a pathological liar that he actually believes his lies, and therefore he could not have the necessary state of mind to be charged. And I think what Merrick Garland is going to have to face is that we cannot allow any individual to be such a bad actor that they're able to bad act their way out of a criminal charge. And ultimately, I think Merrick Garland will recognize that that is not a defense. Those are not defenses. And notwithstanding whatever Donald Trump is trying to set up for his future criminal defense, it's going to fall on deaf ears over at the Justice Department.
Andrew Weissmann, I think it's a line we're going to be hearing now for as long as Donald Trump is out there talking about this, which is, you know, why didn't you raid Bush's place? Obama took a lot of things with him. Those accusations by Donald Trump against those former presidents surely are something he's going to continue to repeat.
Well, he may repeat them, but they're absolutely false. I mean, if a former president took numerous classified documents and then obstructed justice by lying repeatedly over the course of 18 months and only sort of in a very crabbed fashion gave back drips and drabs such that the Department of Justice had to execute a search warrant, then those former presidents would be treated the same way that Donald Trump is being treated. We just don't have any other example of a former president doing something this outrageous for the same reason we don't have any other former president who didn't agree and believe in the peaceful transfer of power. He is, fortunately for this country, a one-off. But hopefully that the election this past week shows that the country is actually turning a corner and Donald Trump's days are going to be numbered.